So my spiritual reading this morning is a quote from German poet, novelist, painter, and Nobel laureate Hermann Hesse. You were made to be yourselves. You were made to enrich the world with a sound, a tone, a shadow. In each one of you there is a hidden being, still in the deep sleep of childhood. Bring it to life. In each one of you there is a call, a will, an impulse of nature, an impulse toward the future, the new, the higher. Let it mature. Let it resound. Nurture it. Your future is not this or that. It is not money or power. It is not wisdom or success at your trade. Your future, your hard, dangerous path is this: to mature and to find God in yourselves.
The scripture reading this morning is from John chapter 15, 1 through 5. I am the true vine, and my Abba is the vine grower, who cuts off every branch in me that doesn't bear fruit, but prunes the fruitful ones to increase their yield. You've been pruned already, thanks to the word that I have spoken to you. Live on in me as I do in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself apart from the vine, neither can you bear fruit apart from me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who live in me and I in them will bear abundant fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing.
Would you pray with me? Holy One, as we gather our thoughts around authenticity, may we be touched and moved by the Spirit that flows through each of us. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your light and your wisdom. Amen. So what does it mean to be authentic? That's probably the biggest rabbit hole I have ever gone down. It sounded like a really good idea when I was planning this sermon series 6 weeks ago. I'm like, that sounds like a really good thing to talk about. Living authentically. And then I started digging into it and looking up this concept of authenticity, and there have got to be a good 15 definitions out there. And it wasn't quite as easy as I first thought it might be. But I didn't want to let you down. So I adjusted the title a little bit from living authentically to seeking authenticity. Because I think that it's a constant process. It's a constant looking within and seeking to discern what is truth about ourselves and what is garbage layered on by life and society and everything else. So it's a constant process, a lifelong process, to seek authenticity and to live it. So what does it mean to be authentic? Does it mean I get to just say whatever I want to say? No, because those people just have no filter and get to be a royal pain in the you-know-what, right? Does it mean I get to do whatever I want? No. Because what we do is not always informed by the truth of who we really are. We can be triggered and we can do things and say things that hurt ourselves and hurt other people. So no, Being authentic is not just doing or saying what we want. So what is it? Your turn. There's at least 15 answers, so you got, none of them are wrong. Go ahead, Mike.
I always thought of it as uniqueness, or unique.
Okay, so it's your uniqueness, your very unique self. Jerry?
I think it's finding that balance between what society expects of you, how you're supposed to behave, and what you actually want to do or be.
Okay, so a balance, you say, between what society expects, maybe what your family expects, what your friends expect, what other people can, well, let's just say that, what other people expect of you, and what you feel you want and need in your life. I saw another hand somewhere. Done?
Being genuine.
Being genuine. That's a really interesting word. Can you define genuine?
Authentic.
To be authentic. How do you know if someone is not being genuine?
Just if they're not behaving it, well, not as normal or not as, but how you perceive them being genuine and how they perceive being genuine. That's where.
It gets to be kind of a slippery slope, doesn't it? And it gets to be kind of tricky to understand it. So when y'all have the answer to that one, let me know. How do we know if somebody's being genuine? But anything else? So authentic, what does it mean to okay, true to yourself, including what about yourself?
Being who I am.
Being who
Not
you,
being somebody else.
not being somebody else. Being true to your values, your talents, your gifts, your ideas. With the understanding, I think, that who I am right now is not necessarily who I will be 5 minutes from now or 5 years from now. And wasn't who I was yesterday in some interesting way. So there's a flow to it, I think, in some ways. Anybody else want to add anything, Rob?
Well, I would say that your beliefs, your thoughts, your words, and your actions are consistent and long-term.
Your belief, your thoughts, your words, and your actions are consistent and long-term.
Toward values and your core values.
About your core values and your principles. Okay. Hold on a second, let me get Amanda. Okay.
I was kind of going with what Robin just said, but then also turning it inwardly. So there's the whole do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, but I feel like authenticity would also be do unto yourself as you would choose to do to others. Like if you're aware of everybody else's needs and desires and whatever, you have to also remember that yours also matter. Like
So authenticity is also a way of acting, not only toward the outside world, but toward yourself.
yeah, make sure your words, your actions match your words.
Your actions match your words. Okay. Shirley, what were you going to say?
I think to tell if someone is genuine, sometimes their body language doesn't match what they're saying.
Sure, that's one way, I think, probably of determining. That doesn't help Don any.
I think it's more people's.
Oh, no, it doesn't.
She said body language, Don. I don't know if you could hear that, but
I think it's actions.
authenticity is actions or genuineness is actions?
Genuine. So if their actions are matching their behavior.
Exactly. If you do what you say, you're
Right.
gonna do, that's how you can talk.
So to be genuine is to have integrity, is
Right.
to do what you say you're going to do and to treat people, like Amanda said, like you want to be treated. So I think you're all right. Pat, what do you want to add?
I was going to say, maybe I would define it in negative terms, not trying to be someone else, not being like a salamander who would change your colors depending on who you were talking to or what group you were with.
Okay. So for those of you on Zoom, Pat said that being authentic or being genuine is not trying to be what everybody else wants you to be, not being a salamander, you said, which is and just camouflaging yourself, blending in, trying to blend in, but being willing to be yourself. E.E. Cummings once said, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you everybody else, means to fight the hardest battle which any human being can fight. So name a time when you felt that you lived inauthentically, or had to be inauthentic, or were forced to be inauthentic, or a situation, even if it's not related to you, where somebody might feel that they had to be inauthentic. Every day. Carla?
I immediately thought about Pine Ridge and how, when we were there, how the Native Americans were kind of forced to become part of our society if they wanted to make it. And there was this constant struggle between them wanting to still keep their identity, but to also, quote unquote, make it in life. And how people were shunned for going to college or finding their career path. And if they chose to do that, they were almost losing their identity as well because they couldn't stay at the reservation then for those opportunities.
Right, so for those of you on Zoom, Carla was talking about Pine Ridge and the challenge of the natives who are living on the reservation to be true to themselves, to be true to their culture, but also to, there's a real dance going on, but to also be in the midst of America, to maybe want to go to college, but not have your aunts, your elders look upon that as a good thing, look at that as a betrayal, buying into the other culture. There's a lot going on there, yeah. Chris?
Well, yeah, kind of going off what Carla was saying. My dad knows the story better, but my grandfather, when he was, I think, like 8 years old, you know, he's a Indian Chippewa, Bad River tribe, and his stepfather, I think, or somebody like that, they sent him and his brother to this boarding, they call it Indian boarding school, to be assimilated, basically, into white culture, white Western American culture, and to take everything that is part of Native culture, like, for example, if you go to a museum, you see like regalia and things like that. That's not really honoring the tradition because to them that didn't exist, you know. So their authenticity comes from the fact that, well, for example, my grandpa, he broke out of that school when he was 8, and he somehow made his way back up to Wisconsin. And this is like in the 1920s, something like that.
So I think for all of the Native American children who were taken away from their families and forced to assimilate.
Well, it was his stepdad that's not in there, actually.
All right. Well, a lot of kids were taken.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for just almost any time that a ruling group of people has taken over an area and forced the native, the indigenous folk, whoever they were, to abide by new laws and new gods and new societal structures and so forth. So
jumping ahead to 2023,
okay.
TikTok and Snapchat. I see a lot of the teenagers getting involved in this and being very disingenuous and not genuine towards other peers, other friends, and picking, almost like bullying in a sense, and cracking down on that. And also the fact that the delusion of becoming an influencer, that's like the #1 goal for a lot of teenagers. And you're like, let's come back down to reality and find a job, right? And find, do you want to go to school? Do you want to go to tech school? You're not, the likelihood is you being an influencer is 1 in 20 billion.
Right.
That's
So
getting that back to reality.
The social media influence on the world, frankly, and it's not just our youth, but youth especially, who there's so much bullying and so much, you want to be somebody, you want to be an influencer and influence other people. This need to be that, to be important.
It's very stressful on that generation of youth, though.
Yes, so it's adding to their anxiety and their stress and their
correct. That's what they know. So.
Other instances you want to lift up? Amanda?
Before you come out, or before I came out, if we make it specific, feeling like you have to walk and walk if you're going to talk the talk, even though you know that you are walking it, even if it doesn't look the same to other people. So you call yourself a Christian, but you're gay, and people don't think those can coexist. But knowing that it does, and the freedom that comes, and when you decide to live authentically, and people around you start recognizing that, oh, you're walking the walk doesn't have to look like what I thought walking the walk would look like. So sometimes finding that authenticity while hard can actually be helpful, not just to yourself, but to others around you.
Right, so to regurgitate a little, so I think Amanda, for those of you on Zoom, talks about not only your coming out, but any LGBT person coming out, but then also the struggle to try to come out and be Christian when so many people in this world still believe that being LGBT and being Christian are incompatible. So yeah, the struggle to find to model a new authenticity so people have a new perspective.
And modeling it to both sides, because both sides.
And modeling it for both sides, absolutely. So there's all kinds of ways. Jobs that ask us to lie, do things that are unethical. Trying to be who our parents wanted us to be. Trying to, we put on a mask. Think about the masks that we've worn in our lives. The mask of perfectionism and the mask of pleasing, or we get caught up in our fear and of being ourselves, and so we resort to trying to be what everybody else wants us to be. We could probably go on and on and on about all of the ways that each of us has found ourselves in moments of inauthenticity. And not to mention everybody else. We've all been there, we've all done it. I can tell you the times in my life when I have not been true to who I was, or I had it, sort of beaten out of me by, kids who bullied me or made fun of me or whatever. And we've all been there. So it makes it really, really hard to even remember that we have an authentic self, because we're playing this game in society. Right? So Herman Hesse, the quote reminds us, he says, you are made a certain way, and the world needs the person that you are. And then he takes it one step further, because this is where I started to get hung up in authenticity. And I think but this is where authenticity and spirituality come and connect, which is that under our uniqueness and our talents and our skills and our thoughts and our ideas and our dreams and our imagination, underneath all of those authentic pieces is the divine within. It's sort of the ground of our authenticity. And that's where Herman Hesse says, the hard, dangerous path for each of us is to mature and find God in ourselves. Don Miguel Ruiz in The Circle of Fire wrote this. He said, God is here. God is living inside you as life, as love, but you have to see that truth or there's nothing. You are here to be happy, to live your life, and to express what you are. You were created to perceive the beauty of creation and to live your life in love. But it draws us back. So if we can touch that pure, deep self underneath even our uniqueness, if we can remember that we're beloved, and I have preached this for 26 years, that each of us is beloved as we are, with our faults and our feelings and our mistakes and everything else, if we can touch that and know that, that's where the power comes to be authentic. Does that make sense? If we have the grounding of a deep, deep love for who we are, then it gives us the strength and the courage and the boldness to be that, to live that. It's one thing to know it in your head. I've known it for 26 years, right? I've known it for longer than that. And God loves us as we are. A lot of churches, those other Christianities don't preach that, which is why you're not accepted there, right? But it's hard to live it. Because society wants so many different things. There's a story, an old Carolina story about a boy who used to carve dogs out of blocks of wood. And he would sit on his porch and he would carve the wood and he'd let the shavings fall around him. And people just loved these beautiful little dogs that he would carve. And a visitor came and saw him one day and said, well, how do you know what kind of dog that you're going to carve? How do you do that? And he said, well, I just whittle away the parts that aren't a dog. So I went with this theory this week. I'm going to turn it. No, I did not whittle a dog. But I started thinking about, I looked at soap and said soap seemed easier to whittle than wood. And I'm like, society and our families, it's kind of like they want everybody to be the same kind of soap, right? We all need to look the same and smell the same and stand up the same. Stand up the same. Fine, be your authentic self and live.
That's me, my part.
And it's up to us to whittle away the pieces that society's put on us and forced on us and our families have and our work have and everybody else, to whittle away the pieces that aren't us. So my authentic self looks like a bunny a little bit. But I thought, that's kind of what this is about. Donna, if you can't see, it's a really bad soap carving of a bunny holding an egg.
It's not bad.
And it's also not finished, right? Because, well, one, I'm not an artist, but two, metaphorically, we always have to keep whittling away the parts that aren't us, that aren't true, not only to the things we think we know about ourselves, but that aren't true. Bunny doesn't want to stand up either. But that aren't true to that beautiful self underneath all those ideas. And that's why I grabbed onto that scripture from that Robin read for us. Jesus is the vine and the branches, and he says, I am the vine, and God is the vine grower, and God trims away the parts of me that aren't bearing fruit. I thought, well, that sounds a lot like whittling. Wow, Jesus even had to be whittled of the parts that were inauthentically Jesus, so that he could bear the fruit of love and compassion and justice, and so that he could walk the talk. And then he says, and you're connected to me. I'm the vine, you're the branches. And so if you stay connected to me, follow my example. Follow my teachings, follow my lessons. And you'll stay connected to God and you'll learn to live authentically. 2 chapters later, he does the whole thing of, I am in you and you are in me and God is in me and God is in us and we're all connected, we're all one. But we've got to stay connected. To remember that beautiful soul underneath everything. So let me tell you a story. True story. Has anybody heard of Cecil Williams? Has anybody ever been to San Francisco? Anybody ever been to Glide Memorial, United Methodist Church in San Francisco? So this is a story about Cecil Williams who made Glide Memorial the kind of church that it is. I was able to go there once when I was in seminary, and it was just an amazing experience. So Cecil Williams was born in 1929, a black man in Texas, San Angelo, I think, Texas. Born in a town that was segregated before civil rights. Born into a place where whites assured him that he was second class, and that he was a nigger, and that he was not as good as everybody else, and by the way, he never would be, right? He had that, and then he had his black family and his black church who assured him the exact opposite, that he was somebody and he was worthy and God did love him. And so he lived in this tension of all of that. And even as a young boy, he was sort of a superstar in his church. He was looked at as someone who was, maybe wise beyond his years and talented and involved in all of those good things. So they called him Rev, even as he was little. He and his brothers were kind of pseudo-famous in the area because they had good voices and they had a white voice teacher. And so they became famous in the Kiwanis Service Club circuit where they'd go and they'd sing before everybody. But then when they were done singing, they'd be asked to sit way in the back of the room. Or worse yet, they'd be very quickly ushered out of the room after everybody was done clapping. And he struggled with that rejection. He railed against it. And he's under 10, right? And his father would say to him, just let it be. It's not our time yet, just let it be. But he had a Papa Jack, his grandfather, his mother's father. Papa Jack never just let it go. Papa Jack was an ex-slave. And anytime the white bill collectors came around to try and get more money out of his mother and call her racial slurs at the same time, Papa Jack was in their face, probably risking his own life, but in his face telling him to get out and cut it out. And Papa Jack was Cecil's hero, right? He looked up to this man. He said he's bold enough to be who he is and stand for what's right. He was genuine and authentic and bold. There was a time where a bunch of college students from the University of Texas came to interview Papa Jack about what it had been like to be a slave. And they all sat on the front porch, and Papa Jack gathered all the grandkids around, and everybody sat around while he told the stories. And then after all the questions were answered, and his stories were done told, he looked at his grandkids and he waved his arm. He said, Papa's an ex-slave. You be an ex-slave too. About a month later, Papa Jack passed away. And Cecil was, at 10, was completely distraught over that grief, over the rejection that he faced on a daily basis, over the insults that he faced on a daily basis. Depressed about the hope that he had for a better future that he wasn't seeing, right? So at 10 years old, this poor boy had a nervous breakdown and fell into just this pit of darkness for months. He would hear voices, and he would hear the sound of a train that was coming in the darkness, and this train was always trying to take him further into the darkness. And he had visions, and he saw people, and all of them were trying to convince him that he needed to just give up the fight, that he needed to just give in to being a nigger in the South, and that it wasn't going to get any better. And he tossed and he turned and he fought with this darkness for a long time. And then one night, he was visited by two, as he called them, aliens. One was a little white boy dressed in his Sunday best, and one was an old white man dressed in black with a candle in one hand and a gun in the other hand. And Cecil felt like he was standing on the edge of a huge, black, infinite pit of darkness. And they wanted him to jump in. They wanted him to just get it over with, give it up, be done. And he knew that this was his last choice. And it was he worth going on for? Was there anything worth fighting for? And somewhere out of the depths of his own being, he said no. He wasn't going to jump. And he yelled no. He said, I'm not going with you, not tonight, not any night. And that was when he started to come back to himself. That was when he touched the depth of his own authenticity. That was when he lived into his genuineness. From there, Cecil had a vision. Even as a kid, he had a vision of a different kind of place. A place where everybody was included. All ages and descriptions and races. Everybody, a place that was loud and vibrant and colorful. And he carried that vision from the time he was a child through seminary and out into the church and became a United Methodist pastor and came up against a brick wall in his own black clergy who were threatened by his vision, threatened by his confidence, threatened by his voice, and yet he pushed on until probably in his early 30s, 1966. He was finally appointed as the pastor of Glad Memorial Church in San Francisco. And it was a small, white, affluent congregation. But it was in the midst of the Tenderloin district, surrounded by violence and criminal activity and drug abuse and homelessness. And he went in and he created the vision that he had. The church that I saw, the church that it grew into, was one of complete diversity, of treating people the way we wanted to be treated, the way he wanted to be treated. A place that was loud and colorful, where the cross was taken down because he wanted people to stop focusing on death and start focusing on life. Because he wanted to give people back their own voice and their own authenticity. He was able to live into his authentic self. That's what it looks like. And it wasn't easy, and it was hard, but he had something to give the world, and by golly, he gave it. Now, I'm not saying he wasn't perfect. He had his own issues, struggled with perfectionism, struggled with doing everything, and finally learned to overcome those pieces too. So it's a constant growing, a constant whittling away of those things that don't serve us or serve anyone else, and constantly finding who we are. And that's our journey. Our sacred, dangerous journey to whittle away what isn't us and to find God within. Amen.